What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 394. Fun show tonight because we get to welcome David Roche, Coach Roche, back to the show for another Ask Coach Roche. We have a lot to chat with him about today. He just released an article today about mental health in sport and how mental health is health that we should be paying attention to as athletes, and I could not agree more. We talk about it a lot on this show, but tonight will be a great episode. David's also here to answer any of your questions, whether they're training related, racing related, anything. So bring it into the live chat room. We're very excited about tonight's show because David Roche is back. Sit back, relax. Here we go. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 394. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Tuesdays to spend a little bit of it with us. What did I do?
I almost missed that. Yay. I almost missed it.
You would think that we would know how to do this. And now we've gotten to the point where we make the joke that we think we'd know how to do this every show, which is...
we actually don't know how to do this.
We completely forgot how to do this. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're very excited to have you. We have a great guest tonight, the regular guest on the show. Both eats lots of fiber and definitely joins us on the show regularly. David Roche is joining us. Ask Coach Roche is the name of these episodes because he's one of the best coaches in the business, coaches athletes of all levels, front of the pack, back of the pack, and everyone in between. And we get to ask him the questions that we have about our training and racing and upcoming stuff that we have planned, adventures and stuff. But also this is your chance to ask a professional coach all those hard-hitting questions that maybe you just don't have an outlet to ask someone to ask. This is that great opportunity. So before we introduce David, though, got to introduce this wonderful, beautiful human being to my right. Hi.
Hi.
All right. So moving on. Hi, Kim.
Hi. How are you?
Good. Goofy today.
Yeah, it's a weird one today.
I just popped off the treadmill. I'm trying to catch my breath. I'm also trying to not show all the sweat that's on my back. I drip sweat only on my back.
Of course you do.
I don't want to take the stage away. It's yours.
Hi, everyone. Kim Tashima Newberry here. As always, if you're new, say hi in the chat room. And if you're old, say hi in the chat room, too. And if you have questions for our wonderful guest, David, ask them in the chat room.
We also have some individuals we'd like to thank at the top of every Ginger Runner Live episode. It's because of them that we're able to do Ginger Runner Live every single week. We have a daily live stream called Daily Brew. We also get to do with the entire GR crew, all of our reviews, films, everything like that. We call them our GR crew. They are our Patreon subscribers. You can join the GR crew. It's very easy. Head on over to patreon.com/the Ginger Runner. All tiers get access to some really fun perks. Tonight is an example. We have an after show with all of our guests every single week during Ginger Runner Live, and that after show is just for Patreon subscribers to ask all the questions that maybe didn't get asked during the main show. Tonight is, again, no exception. Two individuals in particular at the top tier of our Patreon GR crew we like to shout out as well. Brian Sands, longtime supporter, amazing human being. We love Brian so much. Ultra runner. It's great to have him be a part of the crew. And Rick Bjarnason. Rick is a British Columbia resident out of Canada, but also an ultra runner and a web designer and he owns a company called cheekymonkeymedia.ca, which is a web maintenance company. Great company. They did the gingerrunner.com website. So shout out to those two individuals. We appreciate them very, very much. Without further ado, we'd like to welcome our guest back to the show. Today, he's got a beautiful microphone. So his voice is crispy.
I also kind of feel like we may all have planned our outfits around said beautiful microphone.
Our outfits are color coordinated with David Roche's microphone. Hi, David.
Hey, it's so great to be here. I was just sitting there the entire time you're doing the intro, and I'm just smiling so hard that you know how you get that feeling that you get delayed onset muscle soreness right up here in your cheeks. So I have soreness in these. Yeah,
Doms in the cheeks.
Right here. From smiling so much, and also DOMs in these cheeks from how regular I am, as you guys were discussing. So I'm just combining it all into one full package, plus, really phallic microphone here.
Well, what I'm realizing is I have not only color coordinated with your microphone, but also it just looks like I'm also a microphone. The way it's perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. This is all
we're
hitting dingers today.
No, I totally know what you mean. Every time I look at a human head, I'm like, microphone, phallus, microphone.
How are you, David? It's been a while since we've had you on the show. We love having you on.
Things are going really well. I mean, the big news here is that it's Baby Fox. Well, it's the day after Baby Fox Day because we have a baby fox. We have a fox family that lives in our next door neighbor's house or behind their house. and the baby foxes came out for the first time of the year. So I think that that's a sign for hope for everyone. Also, if anyone is interested and has some money lying around, that house is for sale. So you can buy the fox family. That's a pretty cool thing too.
It's a life goal of mine to see a fox
Yeah.
in the wild.
Kim
'cause
talks about it often.
I've never seen one in the wild. Now we need to buy the fox house, but just the fox house, not the actual human house.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we get just the parcel, which is,
It is a
like
shed.
2 foot by 2 foot?
It is a shed, and this house has been on the market for about 6 months, so they might be a little bit desperate now. I feel like you could probably come in and offer, I don't know, a few things of coffee or something, and they'll sell at this point. They've had open houses and no one has come. I'm kind of confused what their end game is. I'm pretty sure it's some sort of elaborate protection scheme for a drug running operation or something like that, where it's basically the only consideration we can possibly have at this point.
I am also quietly picturing you and Megan sort of like dressing up as ghosts, kind of Beetlejuice style, and like actually like haunting the for sale house. Like, you don't want to buy this,
Well,
while you're eating cereal or something.
We're very happy that someone's going to buy it. Like this neighbor has never, I don't think, loved us. We're often running outside of his house in underwear. I'm not sure if that does good things for the property value or bad things. But the fact that it hasn't sold, not productive, perhaps for not necessarily a good verdict on the underwear running. But Matt, one of my best friends and an athlete on the team, Matt Daniels, was recently, him and his wife Lauren were looking to purchase a new home, and I was like, oh, next door we can break down the fence and have a some work all play commune right here. And unfortunately, they priced their house so high. So I feel like what we need to do is have some sort of haunting situation that gets them to, or perhaps we need to haunt the Zillow Zestimate algorithms so that the estimates go way down. Yeah, so that's basically what's going on here. We have foxes, overpriced house, running in underwear, microphone phallus. That's it.
It was great having you on.
A normal Tuesday.
Normal Tuesday, and also this has been a great show. So thanks, David. We appreciate it. Tip of the hat.
We got everything we came for.
That was it. Like the amount.
Actually, no, I'm going to jump in one more time. So the April Fool's review video of you testing the Sauconys was the greatest experience Megan and I have ever had in our whole lives. We laughed for the entire duration of the video. We just laughed nonstop over and over and over again. So thank you for that. If people haven't seen it, please go watch it. I'm sure everyone has, but it is if anyone listens to this on podcast format, for example, Ginger Runner, I don't know, what was it called? What was the title of the video?
How I review shoes. Basically me pulling the curtain back.
Greatest source of comedy in the running world I have ever seen. So thank you for that, Joy.
Maybe we should take some shoes and go review shoes outside of David and Megan's neighbor's house.
That would scare anybody away.
That will drive down the value.
Driving cars over things and lighting them on fire. Like,
you can review the house with a sledgehammer, just like.
I like what we're doing here. I had this whole show kind of planned out in my head and like where we were going to go, sort of the conversation and how I was going to direct it. And I just don't care anymore. I just like this. This is all I want to talk about. To be totally honest, David, you released an article today to kind of bring the choo-choo train back onto the choo-choo tracks. You released an article today on Trail Runner that was wonderful. I think the timing of it is important because as someone who deals with my own mental health struggles, seeing an article like this that sort of addresses it, opens it up, and kind of reminds people that it is an issue that a lot of people deal with, whether, depression, anxiety, any level of mental health issue. It is something that a lot of people are working through constantly, especially now kind of coming out of the pandemic. So it couldn't have been timed better. Been dealing with my own shit right now, and it was really, really wonderful to kind of see this article, hear your experiences like with your mom and sort of the connection there. So I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable. Same with your mom. But I'm kind of curious, where did the impetus to write about this come from, and now of all times?
I love that question. So there were two things that led me to write about it. One is a few weeks ago on Instagram, I did a little love letter to my dad, which was talking about how big of a role he played in my athletic development, where he my dad is this he's a very quirky person, most loving person you ever met, never seen him angry. But when I was a little kid, he would tell me that, um, David, you're not going to peak until you hit 40 at least. And
Mm.
I was like 8 years old at the time. And he was already trying to like make sure I knew I had tons of time and I was in no rush. And, now that I'm in my mid 30s, I think of that advice all the time. So I had done that. And like, I was like, oh, I need to write a love letter to my mom. And I thought back to like how much she's played a role in my life, from being like the best person I ever met, but then also, showing me that you can be imperfect. And
Mm.
in that imperfection, you know, lift up the world around you, even when it's too heavy sometimes.
Mm.
So I want to do that. And then the other thing was, a couple of my best friends that I happen to coach right now are just going through really hard times. And they're going through hard times in a way that, like, it's opened my eyes to the extent of struggles, particularly related to like, you know, substances or eating disorders that, I don't know, really made me think about empathy and how we conceive of empathy more generally. Because, like, I mean, it's easier with my mom almost because I saw her go through severe clinical depression and manic depression in my childhood. So I'm like, okay, I'm attuned to the idea that depression exists.
Mm.
But something like an eating disorder, every part of my experience tells me that, in my own personal experience, that, oh, food's great, like we can work through this. And then you see it in practice and you're like, oh, this is like the most difficult thing. Imagine every impulse in your brain that you currently have switching, flipping on its head, essentially. And I essentially wanted to write something that hopefully, um, expressed empathy for people that had like a fully different experience and feel like they might be alone in that experience.
One of the biggest takeaways that we've had since I opened up with my anxiety struggles in 2015, I think mostly became kind of public about it, was just the number of people who are simultaneously going through it in their own unique ways, whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever it might manifest itself as. The number of people reaching out saying, just thank you for talking about it openly and thank you for bringing it into a conversation, because I think for the longest time, I can imagine in your mom's generation, I know for a fact
Yeah.
my parents' generation, talking about it was not something that you ever did. And if you did, it was almost an immediate label of weakness, and the fear of being labeled as weak. Whereas now I think it's, if anything, it's sort of a label of like strength, not,
Yeah.
not necessarily like everyone should have mental health problems, but it's the identity that we all struggle with something at some point, and talking about it, that's the strength, and going to see a therapist, that's the strength.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I think the big thing I wanted to convey, and I want to give props to my mom too, because like she is courageous because she was raised in a generation and by a family that is incredibly focused on, um, perception, how other people view you, all of these other things. And when I told her about this article, I just wrote it because I knew she would be like, heck yes, the more people you can help, the better. Or
Mm.
the more people you can use your platform to help, the better. And the idea with the article, for those that didn't read it, is just essentially me talking about how my mom is the best person I know. And all these amazing memories of her. But then right alongside it is remembering the times she said to me, like, I wish you had never been born. And knowing now how much that was tied to depression, how much that changed when she got on medication, but how much at the same time that depth of feeling and intensity of emotion that might have, created this mental health context that led to severe depression also let her be this person that shines a light so freaking bright that it's not just me. It's like hundreds of students think she's the best teacher that they've ever had. She's
Mm.
won every single teaching award there is. She was almost National Teacher of the Year. Essentially, like the flip side of the coin of whatever creates our badass boss self often has some undertones that might not necessarily be 100% healthy for us in all contexts. That
Mm.
doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means it's a great thing that even as we try to understand it and change it slightly, we don't want to change the whole thing because that coin is great. Um, so the message here. So a lot of people listening might have diagnosed depression or anxiety, and to those listeners, I'm like, you are freaking awesome. Let's work on this. Let's, therapy, medication, everything like that. But even if you don't think you have that stuff, we're all dealing with different mental health contexts, and like, we're all not, 100% fully enlightened in our own mental health, like, awareness. And so it's really good to open up and just be like, hell yeah, this is something, just like I talk about, hey, I got that shin splint. It's like, yeah, I've been kind of sad for a few days, or I'm just like, my heart beats a lot at night sometimes, or I'm just like stressed about taxes, or, I mean, it can vary.
Yeah.
Everything from, my mom telling her son, like, I don't want you around, to, someone just being like, oh, I don't really know if I want to, do this experience, like this presentation. And but all of those are valid experiences. And the more we can open up about them, I think the more we can create this environment where, it's just another element of health that we're all willing to engage on and hopefully treat.
I love having that be a part of the conversation of overall health, because I think we so often talk, and there's questions here in the chat too that I want to make sure that we get to. But in regards to, like, there was a question earlier in regards to being injured and how, like, a physical injury, how you can get through the battle of, like, am I ever going to run again? Right. So, like, a physical injury causes that sort of anxiety and distress, very simply, clearly, like, you want to be able to run again, you want to get back to running, but an injury sort of keeping you from doing it. While simultaneously, a mental health injury or something that you are working through can sort of take you out of it. Like, it all needs to be treated as part of the same equation versus, well, mental health is this whole other thing, and only certain people deal with these struggles. It's like, it's something that we all need to sort of treat, like going to a therapist is like going to a doctor, right? Like, it's all part of the
Yeah.
whole health equation. I'm
And
so glad you brought
just
that up.
talking about it to non-experts, talking about it to your friends and family, is the same as like getting advice from anyone about any
Mm.
topic.
Mm.
We don't have to experience these things alone. And what you said there about the connections, I think, is really fascinating. So let's use an analogy with running. If you've listened to me on this podcast before, or this show before, you've heard me say injury and adaptation are two sides of the same spectrum. So the same thing that can cause an injury is also the stimulus that leads to an athlete improving. And it creates this really nebulous process where you're like, I'm pushing, this is risky, but that risk is essential to take. Similarly, like, mental health and physical health are directly on the same spectrum. They're not two separate things. I mean, in coaching, one of the most fascinating things that any coach could tell you, if you have a method for quantifying the qualitative stress someone feels, which Megan and I try to do,
Mm.
you can almost use a rolling average of that to predict subsequent injury risk, like how likely their body is to have a setback. And the nature of, brain and body being separate things isn't really how it works, because everything we do with our physical nature is mediated by the brain. And everything our brain does happens in the context of the body, in the chemical nature, in the endocrine system, in the nervous system. So, it's this big stew. And I think for so long, we treated athletes in particular like, bodies without a head. And what I think we're trying to do in coaching isn't, we're not mental health professionals. We're also trying to do this with pure performance, is like, everything starts in the brain. And the more we can create a model that starts in the brain, everything from the neuromuscular system to mental health, like, we're going to create athletes that are more equipped, not just to, be faster, but to be happier too.
Mm. I love that. I want to recognize that we are, of course, live with David Roche. We're talking about some amazing subjects today, just really important things, because of David's article that they released today. That's sort of why I wanted to initiate the conversation around this. But we are live. We have tons of questions in the chat room. Kim, you've been super patient. What do we got?
Yeah, and just remind you guys, if you guys have questions still, you can ask them in the chat as well. First question comes from Michael, and Michael says, question for Coach Roche: when life, pets, children pile drive your sleep on the regular, but you still have goals, any tips on prioritizing your training load?
That's so hard. I mean, especially seeing athletes that go through the process of having children, um, you know, the sleep schedule just gets absolutely trucked. Like, if any of our athletes wear Whoops, for example, or a wearable to measure those sort of things, or just take it off. Like, it's not relevant. And so what we always try to do is to tell people, okay, you can almost always, like, explain the importance to your loved ones, to other people involved in this process, with you, about that little bit of time, and the idea that it helps you shine your light more brightly. and then to just carve out that time like you would a business meeting. Because, if it's just, oh, he's going to do his hobby or something like that, it's so much easier to dismiss it, including in your own head, as soon as things get tough. But if you're like, okay, this hour and a half is my hour and a half, or this hour, or this 30 minutes, or even this 10 minutes, it can create this context that lets you be a better, parent, partner, and everything else too. So, this gets back to part of why mental health and physical health are so connection of it is so important to understand, because in advocating for yourself, you can just essentially say, look, this helps me shine my light. And if like people in your life don't understand athletics per se, which is normal. I mean, the things that we do are pretty weird when you think about it. You can explain it in that framework, and compare it to something that is that thing for them. Like some people like to watch TV, or some people like to knit or play chess, or, any sort of hobby, that time for themselves. And I think once you tell people that, they're like, oh, I don't do that myself, but it makes sense now. And so I always come back to, okay, this time now is what lets you shine your light later.
Got it. Go for it.
Yeah, this one comes from Yasa, and this is from our Discord server. It's a little bit long, but I want to read the whole thing. So Yasa says, "Hi, Coach. I know this is a big question in the what is life even realm, but I'll ask it anyway, as I've spent a lot of time trying to puzzle things out. I've spent over half of the last 2 years either injured or in a slow recovering process, Achilles, ankle, tendon trouble, damaged knee cartilage. Every time I patiently rest and cross-train my way back with cycling walks and run walks. But as soon as I add a little bit of hopes and dreams of longer runs, for example, over 45 minutes and interval work, my body finds yet another way to break down and put me back to square one or even zero. Last summer, I started to incorporate weight and strength training, which has been good and very helpful both physically and mentally, but man, I want to run. I do not expect a golden solution or a fix-all answer, as my body is unique as anyone's, but what would your tips be for a 41-year-old guy that keeps breaking down just months into the journey towards a longer period of consistent running?"
Oh man, you freaking got this is my big advice. So this type of thing happens a lot. And I think all of our brains are subject to the availability bias. Like whatever is most available to us, like the experiences that are most available, is what we think is going to be inevitable. And almost every runner has this type of experience at some point. I mean, I think back to when my first 4 years, I dealt with literally every soft tissue injury humanly possible. Like even now, an athlete says something, it's like, oh, I've had that. And it was all in this little window. And since, like, I've had maybe a few days off here and there every few years. Like it's a totally different experience. And the point is you have to, work past that, while trying to, so you recognize that, but then also doing the things that add to health. So the big pointers we have, aside from the obvious of like work with a PT or things like that, is one, take a look at your protein intake. Athletes that have a lot of soft tissue injuries are usually undercutting that. We love this nutritionist named Kylie Van Horn, and she's helped us develop some of these recommendations. Usually that means 100 plus grams of protein a day. And if your body weight is higher, it's even more than that. And if you start to look at how much that is, it can feel like quite a lot. But the amount that helps the body regenerate and helps these adaptation processes is huge. The other thing I would look at is your form. I know that changing form is a little bit controversial, but I would think, okay, can I make sure my cadence is high enough that my strides are quick and soft? It doesn't need to be a certain number on your cadence, but a lot of runners when they first start out kind of plod a little. I know I do. Even now I have to consciously go against it all the time. And it's made a huge difference for me. And I have some articles online about that. And then the next thing is, aim for like consciously being aware every time. If I feel something, I'm going to cross train this day, and just letting your body build up, because 3 days off is so much better than 3 weeks, is so much better than 3 months. And if you layer those three together, the nutrition piece, the form piece, and the willingness to cross train, almost every single body is capable of miraculous things running. The problem is we end up in these ruts where we think that the rut is what defines us, when, the rut is just, like I said, injury and adaptation are connected, and it's just a product of pushing yourself.
Thank you, Yasa, for that question. I know that was on the Discord server, but we appreciate conversations like that and questions like that, Yasa. I kind of wanted to get back into the conversation that we were having, David. In regards to the article, you also make reference to another article written, which again I also really enjoyed, in regards to using running or exercise in general as it is not therapy, or it is not necessarily like, I guess paraphrase it better than what I'm doing, because the headline is far clearer.
Running
But
isn't therapy.
thank you.
You-
I got there.
Mr.
In lots
Microphone
more
Head.
words.
Mr. Microphone Head nailed it, is what I'm trying to say. So this article was written by Zoe Rome, the editor-in-chief now of Trail Runner, an absolutely wondrous human being. Everyone follow her if you don't. She is brilliant and an incredible athlete too. But she wrote this article a couple years ago, and the thesis was what it sounds like, that it was essentially saying, there's a lot of talk in the running community that running is my therapy. And that is a fact for some people that have certain types of mental health contexts, but it is not for everyone. And any coach, and Zoe's a coach as well, sees this, that once you get a glimpse into like actually what people experience, running isn't just not therapy. It can often make things substantially worse depending on the source of the problems. And the reason I brought up that article in particular was this was back when Trail Runner had a comment section. It doesn't anymore, because once Outside brought it under the umbrella, Outside doesn't have comment sections, which I kind of miss. I kind of like, I really like that feedback, but sometimes it is not a great thing, as it was with Zoe's article. I believe it got like 150 comments, many of which, and I mean, it was a brilliantly written, very correct article, as any mental health professional would have said. And it was like, this doesn't mirror my experience. This is terrible. And I mean, I think one that missed the point, because Zoe, and what I'm trying to say here too, is not that everyone has the same mental health experience. It's that every mental health experience is so wild and so wildly different that we can't really analogize what other people experience inside of our own heads. And so I'm fortunate, after seeing my mom go through such severe depression, like at least thus far in my life, I've avoided that particular spark, which probably runs inside me genetically. But getting to see her go through it at such a young age really made me aware, okay, different brains can work differently. And I think a lot of us often think that other people perceive the world in a similar way that we do. They get the same facts, they get the same emotions, the same feelings. When you talk to people really openly about it, you're like, oh, so your world experience is just incredibly different than mine. Like, and I come back to the eating disorder thing. This is a crude example, but let's say, imagine that you haven't eaten in 12 hours and like you're just ravenous, right? And the idea of eating like a piece of like a tortilla chip, your mouth waters and you're so excited. And that's how I feel, right? And now imagine if that's flipped and that same impulse is to not eat whatever it is. Or if you're talking about alcoholism, like when you come in from a hot run and you're so thirsty and all you want's water, what if that same feeling is for alcohol? Both of those are crude. That's not how it actually works in the brain. But the idea is like, okay, that radical empathy of trying to be like, how can I put myself in those shoes? So when we say running isn't therapy, we're not saying that everyone needs to be in therapy. They certainly don't. And running is plenty mental health, along with other things for most people. It's just that if you're out there and you're dealing with something, know that like running, if it's just because it works that way for other people, doesn't mean it should for you. And as soon as you recognize that, you can get the help you need, open up that like, needing help is not a bad thing. It is not a weakness. It is not a choice, even if it might feel like a choice to the people that don't have these issues. And as soon as you understand that it's not a choice, it's like, oh my gosh, it could be anything. It could be like, I have a hangnail right now in my brain, or it could be, I have a compound fracture in my brain. And either one involves different treatment options, but knowing that you don't need to be like, just because I can't see it, and just because that person over there thinks I can run through it, means I need to just run through it and suck it up, or get hard or whatever. Like that's not the way the brain works for a lot of people. And I think that's beautiful. It's like a beautiful, tapestry of what the human experience is. And I think the reason that a lot of coaches talk like this is because you see behind the scenes and you're like, well, if you don't get a dose of empathy really quick, you're a shit coach. And just like you're a bad teacher, you're a bad dietitian, you're a bad, anything, not just therapist. And so what I try to do is try to convey that as much as possible to people. It's like, wherever you're at, you are loved and you are enough as you are, specifically because of the hangnail or the compound fracture or that, like fully unblemished, mental health status. Like it all adds into, the beautiful you.
I love that we're talking about empathy in this context, because I think it's so easy to judge right now in this time. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's going through whatever they're going through. There's a lot of different things happening. So I think having a bit of empathy for others and yourself is such a important take. As a coach, you obviously deal with many athletes. How do you, if someone writes in their log or opens up to you about maybe something that they're struggling with, whether that's a mental side of things or anxiety, depression, any of those, any affliction, how do you approach it as a coach? What makes that
Well,
unique?
I always try to approach it as a friend when it's in mental health territory, because I am not an expert, right? I'm trying to bring light to these issues because as a friend, we're so much more receptive to people telling us this stuff than we are someone whose job it is to be a mental health, like a therapist, let's say, even though that is the person that is the next step for a lot of people. So I would say, I would guess 60% of the team goes to therapy at least. Which is something I always encourage. Basically, therapist is like a friend with expertise. Doesn't hurt, can only help. Or probably 25% of the team's on some sort of medication, like antidepressant or anti-anxiety or something like that, none of which have any effect on athletic performance based on all the studies. And what we try to do is just like open up the conversation to say, okay, these are the steps available, but even short of those steps, there's like a process of addressing your mental health that just goes to awareness that this is a thing that isn't a static, you deal with this for the rest of your life. It is evolving just like you are, just like your fitness is, just like your life situations are. And by opening up someone to the potential for evolution, that you're not in a rut forever, just like you're not in a high forever, hopefully you give them a little bit more leeway and freedom to just kind of love themselves and accept themselves, even when they might not be the exact version of themselves that they hope to be all the time, particularly in things like depressive states or going through something rough. But it also goes for like someone goes, a wild thing that happens in running that isn't talked about enough is someone does a race and they're absolutely depressed for 3 days after, or a week after, or a month after.
Right.
And this happens so much. And like, clearly there's something, it happens so often that it must just be something that just happens in some brains. It's totally not a choice. But by talking about this stuff, you just take off some of the pressure. You're just venting off some of that steam from the kettle.
Great comments here in the chat. Do you want to highlight some of them?
Yeah. Comment from Angela in the chat. Angela says, yes, seeking help is nothing to be ashamed of. We wouldn't be ashamed if we needed insulin or an EpiPen, and it shouldn't be any different for any kind of mental health treatments.
I love that. And so you also, I think often insulin and EpiPen for sure. Also like Neosporin, like to just, or gosh, like what's the most, like toothpaste, it's like, I'm just going to let my teeth be like my teeth are forever. It's like, actually, maybe not the best strategy. So like, and that's just the idea that like it varies on the spectrum, right? Like, the reason I was so proud of my mom for like wanting me to tell this story is like, I hope I conveyed how, like, a mom saying that to a child and saying it often is really, really tough, right? And she's the best mom in the world, but like the amount of pain she must have been in to say something like that. Yeah, that is a compound fracture. But like, I know for myself, like I have lots of shit that needs Neosporin all the time. And like, I'm fortunate so far, but if I do hit compound fracture or, anything in between, I hope I'll be ready for that. And we all should be. Like, this is called being human. Like, sentience is a weird concept, and running is so fascinating because I think it really pushes us up against our physical limits in such a way that we're really aware of our impermanence. It can be really productive for mental health, and for some people it can be really destructive when you're at a point when, impermanence just reminds you of like pointlessness, or something like that. And that's why it's like you need it coming from all ends: friends, experts, running coaches, therapists, doctors, everything in between.
One thing that I really hope comes as a result of this conversation, and what I hope happens, is that more people will have conversations with their friends, loved ones, or people that are close to them about these types of things, or at least feel that extra level of relief that they if they do open up to other people about it. Like, I just hope it becomes more prevalent, the conversation, because I think it is. I think so many people struggle in silence, and that was the one thing that I noticed when I opened up about it years ago, was how many people had struggled in silence, but how empathetic other people can be to that opening up is also something really
Yeah.
special.
I think that might be the biggest lesson of all for anyone that's like on the fence about all this stuff. If you open up at all, it is a dose of love like you could never imagine usually. And it gets back to like anything that we hold up in our own heads as a personal failing or whatever. It's usually just everyone being like, you're being vulnerable. I see that in myself or in a loved one or in someone else. This brings me closer to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it especially goes with things like family. So, my mom's example is, maybe treating me in certain ways at different times. But I know I've lashed out at Megan, my wife, in ways that are purely just my own like defensive response to my own mental health context. Often perhaps even tied to those childhood experiences. And by having this awareness amongst Megan and I, we can usually be like, oh, that had nothing to do with like the trash, did it? That was something totally different. Or it had nothing to do with a bad workout or a race
Right.
where you get depressed after. It is so much deeper than that. And by addressing the roots, you just build a really beautiful garden with all your flowery friends and family and loved ones and the broader community in general.
I mean, I guess it goes just straight back to communication. Being in a long relationship with you and being married for a number of years, I think communication is by far the most important factor to a successful relationship and marriage. And I mean, that goes beyond just a love relationship, a familial relationship, friends. Just being open, honest, talking about things and communicating can be such, like you said, a relief. It can be a relief. It can be the response can be nothing but love and just a big warm hug. I think
And also, like, while most things need like more is helpful, sunlight is a great disinfectant to a certain extent. Like another example of things that you see in coaching is athletes going to a race and they get so anxious, not about their race performance, but about the social element of racing. Things like that, like things that you might not even consider if you don't
mm,
think about these or deal with this stuff. And as soon as they tell anyone about it, they're like, "Oh, it feels better now." um,
right.
the idea here just being, I don't know. I feel like when we say you're so loved as you are, it's because this like weirdness that goes into being human, this really illogical nature of thoughts and ideas and things that make us into a person is so cool. And soon as you open up about it, people are like, "That's fucking cool." Like on some level, even if what they're saying is, "Look, I love you, I'm here for you," they're like, "Wow, the brain is interesting," and that brings us all together because inside of our own brains, if we delve down far enough, it all gets interesting. That's the only thing I know for sure. It gets interesting in different ways, and my interesting is different than my mom's and yours. But
Right.
yeah, shit gets cray.
We're all stardust, man. We're all
Yeah.
stardust. My sister actually did. She's a writer, and she wrote something recently where she referenced just us all being stardust, and my brain was like, "Oh my god, is she reading David and Megan's book? This is great! Like,
Did
I love this."
did she have psychedelics with David and Megan?
She was tripping. She
She was,
bought the house next door to you.
And turned into a
yeah.
fox.
Yeah, she turned into a fox.
Oh my god, that would be amazing.
By the way,
Oh
David, you're
man.
tripping balls right now.
I am. I'm not
That
even on the
microphone,
show.
that microphone is an actual mushroom, dude. I'm so sorry. um, I honestly, the article was wonderful. If those of you who are watching live or listening on podcast, if you haven't read the article, please do. David posted the link to it across social media today. It is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. I am curious what your mom thought. So you said you wrote the article before showing it to your mom. Did you publish it before showing it to your mom?
So I lied a little bit in the article. I did send it to. I'm opening up my text messages right now. Wouldn't it be great if I was just like, oh, I need to text. Let's see.
Let's just bring your mom on. We actually
Yeah.
have her via satellite.
Yes.
It's
Um,
1997.
she just said, "You're the best person and my favorite writer," which is you are my favorite writer is a thing in the
Mm,
article.
yeah.
One mistake, weighted blanket. You wrote weighted blanked. So, and then just, and then I have so much gratitude for you. And this was a process. Like, I don't want to say that this was, she took Effexor, she took medication and everything changed. That's not the way it works for anyone. She had to go through a process of finding the right medication. She found one that really did work for her. And, for anyone that's ever met her, she is the life of every party. She's 71 right now. She's living up in Nederland, Colorado, which is a little mountain town here, famous for its pot smoking. And she is the center of the social community there, not for 71-year-olds. I mean, for everyone. Like, she's that person. She is that life force. And what I remember, and what probably is tied to my empathy, is like when I was a kid, that I could see that force dimming, and you would know what was coming. And as soon as she started taking the medication, things got a little bit better. And it's a lifelong journey for her, just like it is for all of us. But I think she noticed and saw that big change in herself, and was like, the more I can help others reach this point, the better. So, if anything, I would say that in writing an article like that, I am just channeling my mom rather than writing about her. And so, I think what I did today is I got a number of, like, probably 40 Instagram messages or whatever, and I haven't responded to them, unfortunately, yet. But I did screenshot a bunch of them with the names not there, and sent them to my mom, because like those people thought they were writing to me saying like, I'm crying, I feel seen for the first time in my life, all this other stuff. And they're like, Mom, this is you. And, I think she's been that person for a lot of people, just like she's been my writing idol and my intellectual, driving force. And, so this was my love letter to Mom, but through something that might be, I'm hipster enough that you need to make your love letters a little bit sharp at the edges.
We have a great comment here from Sarah Gerardo. I identified so strongly with Mama Roche in this article and could see my relationship with Tiny Coach in David's words was so meaningful. Tiny Coach is Sarah's youngin' kiddo. And yes, that's another thing I just kind of wanted to recognize as we wrap up the show, David, was I commend you because the perspective is also from a loved one of someone who's dealing with mental health. And I think that's an oft not talked about position, because anyone who's dealt with mental health, for me personally, I can only speak from my own personal experience, the heavy blanket also comes with burdening other people with your mental health burden. So knowing that your mom was going through depression, but also affected you as her child, and how you grew up and saw that, observed that, and saw the journey that she took, I think is a really important part of the story, an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, and the thing is,
don't really talk
it wasn't
about.
a burden. She's the best mom in the world.
Right.
Like, that's the idea, is that it's never a burden. Like, what could possibly be a burden is thinking that you're a burden to a certain extent. And that's why it's so important to work out of that, because your loved ones love you for you. Like, that is like the definition of love. There's no such thing as conditional love. And so the more you're able to bring people in, and the more you're able to extend that, the better. So, my mom dealt with this in a way that was pretty dramatic for her. I deal with, like, I mean, I don't want to downplay it, but some garden variety anxiety, seeing how tough mental health can be for some people, it is. But I am constantly concerned about my own mental health, and like wanting to check in and do what I need to do for it. But like, I just want people to know that no matter where you fall on that spectrum, from the most severe thing that needs immediate intervention and needs inpatient treatment, to like almost nothing ever, you just kind of like get sad sometimes. It's like, it's all equally valid. And in that, that is why you are beautiful, is because you are those things, and you are not a burden if you're on this end of the spectrum, and you're not a blessing purely if you're on this end of the spectrum. You're perfect wherever you are. It has nothing to do with that mental health context that just makes you human. So I think it's especially important for runners too, because, in this sport, so much goes into, there's so much messaging out there about like our brains not necessarily being something we control. Like, even in my own writing, where I talk about self-talk and positive self-talk and the studies on that, and our brains are out there doing wild laps, often while we're sitting in bed, and giving them the same amount of love that you would in planning your training can be super duper helpful.
We love talking with you, David, and especially around topics like this, because you are so empathetic. We can talk about anything, and you're right there with beautiful insight. hope and caring. And we know that we're not going to be judged when we talk about things with you. And we know that if you talk about things with us, you're not judged. Like, it's a judge-free zone. It's an empathetic zone. And we appreciate you being so open and honest.
I don't know if we're getting close to the end. I was just thinking, just to broaden it out slightly. So mental health can seem kind of amorphous. But you generally know, like depression, anxiety, some of the things that are tangentially related to mental health, eating disorders, alcoholism, substance abuse, stuff like that. I also want to broaden it out to just about everything. Performance anxiety, issues around sex and how you relate to your physical nature. That can be things like erectile dysfunction or women that have sexual dysfunction. The rate of that stuff and how much that is tied to mental health and past experiences is so high. If you're watching this or listening to this and you've had that experience, no, you are shared with so many people, and that is like the stuff that we see in perhaps media is not reflective of the human experience. And that can be so beautiful and also something that is part of this process. And so basically everything we think of that might just be like, oh, I'm weird in this way. It's like, actually, no, you're sharing that with millions of people. I don't mean to, that doesn't make you less special. It just means that we're all special. And, know in that process, whatever it is, whatever makes you feel less than or unworthy, you are amazing no matter what. And that, while your friends and family and everyone will accept you if you open up about this, like the big goal is to get to the point where you accept yourself as you are without necessarily needing to, fully fit a different template of what you think it means to be human. Because I promise, as soon as you see behind the scenes, what it means to be human is this totally variable, totally random assortment of things that go into like perfect little balls of us.
We're Stardust. We're all
Stardust!
Stardust. David, I don't know how we managed to do this every time we have you on the show. We managed to have one, I have a topic in mind that I want to talk about, and then it turns into something completely different. The title of today's show is Getting the Most Out of Your Training, which was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to David because we're at the beginning of the year and we're leading into Tiger Claw and big summer spring races. Like, what can we do? I'm so much happier with how this show turned out. So I'm going to change the title. I'm just going to change it to Blue Microphone is Shrooms, and then we'll just go from there. That sort of encompasses it all. But I just have to recognize how wonderful you are as a guest on a podcast, David, but also as a friend and as a coach. If anyone watching or listening is not up to speed with what David does or how you can enjoy what he does in your own lives, there's a book. There's a podcast. You can join Some Work I'll Play, which is SWAP, which is him and his wife Megan's organization, like coaching crew of runners and athletes from around the world. What am I missing, David? Because I want people to be able to enjoy you 24/7.
My new OnlyFans. That's
Let
probably
me
where the
sign
money
up
is.
real quick.
I just on OnlyFans being like, you're enough no matter what. It's like an ASMR.
Yeah, just a tight shot of the microphone in your mouth and just ASM. I'm into this. Let's do this. Signing up.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, as always, I want to just use this time, support Ethan and Kim. Like they are such a shining light in a way that has made me so much more comfortable in my own skin. And so if you like any of my stuff, support them because they've given me the courage to be vulnerable and take risks. And so love you guys in everything you do, and love everyone listening too. And all the weirdness that goes into each and every one of you.
Our guest tonight has been David Roche. We are going to move into our after show. Our after shows for our Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/thegingerrunner. All tiers there get access to our after shows, both past, present, and future. Tonight is no exception. So any residual questions for David, we'll be asking those in the after show. But of course, before we wrap up today's episode, we do like to recognize members of the community who go above and beyond. We call them our GR crew members of the week. These are people who go above and beyond. Kim, who is this week's GR crew member?
Do they go above and beyond?
Above and beyond. They go above and beyond. Should I phrase that different?
No. Need to hear it one more time.
They go above and beyond.
This week's GR crew member of the week is Randy Cafaro. I want to give Randy a shout out because Randy has been dealing with a lot of health stuff over the last year and a half. And Randy was able to get out for his first real run in over 13 months this past weekend. So congratulations, Randy. We're glad to see you back out there.
Randy's been a long-time supporter for years and years, and we just love seeing that his journey, he's back to running. He's getting the miles on the trails that he loves so much. So Randy, congratulations on being our GR crew member, and congratulations for getting back. We absolutely love you, my friend. That's going to wrap up tonight's episode of Ginger Runner Live. Wonderful episode. Thank you to our wonderful guest, David Roche. You know how to follow him on social media. And again, go get the book, the podcast, everything. You just Google David Roche and you'll find a myriad of things, including his OnlyFans, which he started right now. We're going to move right into our after show. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Go Kraken. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Ginger Run.